our webinar, and someone will read them out for you in the room, and our speaker will be able to answer them for you. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our August public lecture. We're delighted to be able to host Dr. Lucia Perez-Diaz, which is a computational geoscientist and an author-illustrator from Galicia, Spain, now based in Oxford. She models large-scale geological processes such as continental breakup and ocean formation to study impact on life and climate. Her passion for science communication began during her PhD, leading her to use art and illustration to engage young minds. She recently published her first children's book, which you'll be able to see this evening for those of you in the room. We have some copies to have a look at. It's down here. Can I plug it, or do you want to plug it? This book, you'll be able to see it in our drinks reception afterwards. And she is here to share her knowledge about using art and illustration with science to communicate to the world beyond academia. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Lucia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's really nice to be back here. And thanks everybody for turning up also online. I know there's a lot of people, no pressure. So I'm going to start with something that's in my pocket that I should have taken out already. This is Pablo, and I'm going to show you that is Pablo right there with his mates. And Pablo obviously is a pebble. The genius name's not up to me. Actually, somebody that follows me on social media came up with it. And he is the leading character in a series of books for little kids that kind of introduce them gently to science and nature and their place in it. But he's a lot more than that. He is also a really great example that sometimes engaging the public in something as boring as rocks, sorry, that's what the public think, can be done with something as simple as a shape with 2 dots and a line for a face. And I think I like Pablo because he kind of debunks 2 myths that often stop scientists from drawing, from illustrating. And those 2 things are that you need a lot of talent to get into art or anything creative, and that you need a lot of time. Sometimes you don't need either. So Natasha already kind of introduced me, but I'm gonna reintroduce myself. So like she said, I'm a computational geoscientist. I'm somewhere between a programmer and a geologist. I use computers to solve geological problems. Sometimes I don't introduce myself that way. I instead say that I'm a detective, and I work with a team of engineers, and together we build time machines. Because when I'm talking to children, they like that a lot more than the words computational geoscientist. And so that is me reading from my book. And essentially, this my book that Natasha mentioned, How the Earth Works, is me realizing that what I do is really fascinating. Reconstructing past plate motions is really fascinating. Children love it. They love to know they're on a moving tectonic plate. And yet there were no books about it, so why not make one? And I was lucky enough that I was able to. A lot of colleagues, a lot of scientists that I talk to, I often do illustration workshops, and they often come to me and say, well, I can't draw. And I sometimes ask the room, oh, can you put your hand up if you identify with this feeling? And a lot of people do. And so I wanted to start this talk with just talking a little bit about these barriers that we sometimes impose upon ourselves that stop us from trying things that maybe we think we're just not good at. So as adults, we often draw something, and then we look at it. We ask ourselves difficult questions. Is this good? We might even ask, is this art? If you're really, looking for some pain. And then you go, no, this is terrible. I should never draw again. And I think that's quite funny because at least fellow scientists, when I ask them, well, when you write a paper and you give it to your colleagues and they give it back to you with comments, track changes, it's all read, the document's fully read, loads of comments everywhere. Do you ever look at it and think, well, this is awful, I should never write again? I don't think so. Or if we're giving a talk and we get our words kind of confused, oh, I was rambling a bit, I should never speak again. We never do that, but we do it with art. We kind of expect a lot of ourselves. And if we perceive that we're not good at it, we just don't do it. But I want to share with you something that not many people get to see. This is a sketch I did when I was working on How the Earth Works. And I know exactly what it's meant to show because I did it. That's the contents of my brain on a page. It looks a bit like a spaghetti plate. That evolved into that, which then evolved into that. They're both really dark if you think that these are illustrations for 7 to 10-year-old children. I don't know what was going on in my life, but something was going on. That evolved into that, which then evolved into that. We're maybe going in the right direction. Then we got to this. Who thinks this is the final version? Can you put your hand up? Nobody. That is rude. First of all, it's not the final version. You knew I was tricking you. That is the final version. And I wouldn't blame anybody if they looked at that, if I posted that on my social media, or you saw me giving a talk and I showed it, and you looked at that and you thought, well, objectively, I cannot do that. I cannot draw like that. I cannot do that. But that is really not important, because it's not whether you can do that, it's whether you can do that and then put yourself through the time and the sort of discomfort that it goes with looking at things you've done, acknowledging that they don't make you happy, you're not pleased with them, maybe they even make you feel inadequate and like you lack the skills, and still keep going. There is a graphic designer I really like called Chris Neiman, and he's extraordinarily successful. He does the covers for The New Yorker, for example. And he often in his talks complains about how painful it is to be always sitting at his desk, feeling inadequate, like he can't get it quite right. The next cover, oh, it's not going to go right. Which, for the rest of us mortals, we look at him and go, you're on the cover of The New Yorker, stop complaining. But he talks about artists as having a talent, but not the talent that people think. Some people don't just, are not just born with the talent to be creative, come up with ideas, illustrate. They have the talent of maybe sitting uncomfortably more than anything else. So for most of us, we compare ourselves. And, oh, I forgot. That's the final version, actually, because with books, you have a thing called an art director. They have opinions. She's lovely, but they decided, let's make it landscape. It'll only be a minute. Often what we see coming from others and what we assume are not really, it's not really the reality, right? If you're looking through my book and, oh, I can't draw like this. Well, I don't draw like that. I get there eventually. So that out of the way, you all can draw. Perhaps as of today, you only draw things you dislike. That's okay. You can only get better. So let's go back to art and science. And it's been really great over the last few years to see how much art in science and science and art has come to the forefront. Here at the GeoSoc, we even had a 3-day conference about science and art called Unearthed last year, I think. Science is everywhere in art and art is everywhere in science. Maybe we just didn't quite notice fully before. And here are 2 examples, one of each. So on the right, on the left, you have a drawing by a Spanish neuroscientist called Ramón y Cajal. And he did these really amazing drawings of the human brain and different aspects of the human brain. And he did them for one of the reasons that scientists should always be drawing, to understand. Through sketching, he was growing his own understanding more than anything else. Eventually, these drawings were published, but he used them and he speaks of them in his writing as tools to understand. Now, today is undoubtedly something with a bit of an artistic quality to it. If you visit the museum in Madrid, you can actually buy art reproductions of his sketches to put on your wall. And then on the other hand, we have a painting that I'm sure a lot of you have seen before, La Persistencia de la Memoria by Salvador Dalí. You can tell I'm Spanish because I'm only using Spanish examples. And this is art. Most people would agree this is art. This sits in art galleries. But there is also a very interesting science thread running through it, because if you read a little bit about Salvador Dalí and his many interests, one of the things he was really interested in were the physics of relativity and the work of Einstein. And that kind of comes through in paintings like this and in a lot more of his work. So this is an example where science is coming into art. The one over there is the opposite, is art coming into science. I often get people saying to me, oh, you're kind of both, right? You're a scientist, but you're an artist. You're kind of in between. It's a little funny to me to think that you can be between science and art. I don't think there is a between science and art. I think science and art overlap almost completely, in fact. And out of all the sciences, geoscientists are really well placed to dip their toes into art, because if nothing else, we all own a set of coloring pencils. We have them from our degree. They're forgotten in a drawer. We draw everything. We draw maps, we draw cross sections, we draw hand specimens, we draw the things we can see, but we also, more importantly, perhaps we draw the things we cannot see. We draw the subsurface, we draw the evolution of structures we haven't seen evolving, but we see the final structure and we draw it back through time. We use sketching and drawing as a tool for understanding. And that is the reason why when we teach students and we go to the field, yes, nowadays they take photos of outcrops, but really they're still asked to draw those same outcrops, because it's the time that it takes you to draw something that your brain is able to comprehend what you're looking at. So it's a really great tool. And we do everything from things like data visualizations. So taking hard data and putting it into a graphic form makes sense. We're visual beings. A graphic always kind of can communicate a bit easier with people than a chunk of text. We also do things that are purely based on ideas. This is a cartoon from probably one of my favorite papers of all time, which is called Graphical Solutions to Problems of Plumacy. It talks about mantle plumes, and it has all these humorous cartoons that are pretty brilliant. There's no hard data there, it's just ideas and humor in this case. And then we do things that are in between. Most of the time, that's where we are when we draw block diagrams, when we draw structures. We're somewhere in between. We are mixing hard data with our own ideas. And that is part of the problem and part of the reason why sometimes when we give our figures to other people, or if you're not a scientist, when you pick up a magazine or you pick up, I don't know, something that has an article with figures in it, you look at them and you can't quite follow. That's our fault as scientists, because we're so used to utilizing figures for our own benefit that we forget everybody else. So we start making a figure and then we add something else to it. And then we get a new data set. Well, I ought to put it in as well. And then, I don't know, I've spent 2 months on this paper. Well, I'd rather put this other thing, this other thing. Let me put an inset here and another legend and another box on this diagram. And by the end of it, they're not figures anymore. They're not graphical representations of knowledge. They're just graphical representations of the contents of our rather disorganized brain. We can follow them because we've built them layer by layer. But anybody else that gets a figure from us can't follow it. And I'm going to spend most of the rest of this talk going through some of the things I've learned over the last few years, both teaching about science communication, also illustrating for children, some strategies, some things to have in your mind if you ever create anything graphic that is based in science. And I'm going to start with a figure that is the one that always pops into my head. If somebody said to me, okay, picture a geoscience related image, this would be it, most likely. It's the first ever computer assisted reconstruction of the Atlantic. It's by Ballot Everton Smith. It came out in 1965. It's simple because, well, first of all, they didn't have access to lots of graphic design tools in the 60s. But also it's simple because there's not a lot of data in it. There was not a lot of data at the time. Plate tectonics was only starting out. Our understanding of plate tectonics was only starting out. So it puts across a very simple message. When you bring these things together, they kind of fit, but they kind of don't. You can go even further back in time into hand-drawn sketches. And in this case, there is no data whatsoever. It's just a notion, an idea. Somebody looked at a map and went, well, these two things kind of look like they fit. I'm going to show other people that they kind of look like they fit. That's it. That's all I'm doing. And then fast forward to today, and you end up with things like this, spaghetti plates. So much information that you can't possibly even know where to start. And I can say that that's my own figure. I'm not offending anybody. I'm saying it is terrible. Because I was doing my PhD and I wanted to document some things. And I ended up documenting everything that was in my head at the time. And so it's great now for talks. the reason why this middle example is very successful, so we've gone from something purely based on ideas to something that has both, to something that has too many ideas and too much data. And that's a problem we have, right? In science, our understanding, our knowledge evolves, the availability of data also grows. So it makes it difficult for us to make figures that really speak, because we expect them to do a lot. The reason why this was so successful is because it gives you some answers, right? They're using the data that they had to reconstruct these continental landmasses using a computer and showing you how they fit or how they don't quite. So it's giving you some answers, but it's also giving you some questions, because if you're a geoscientist, if you were a geoscientist and you looked at this, you would be like, oh, I wonder why there is an overlap there. And that is really powerful, because when an image sparks curiosity and sparks questions, it leads to more research, it leads to more interest, to conversations, to discussion. And the questions that figures should raise are not the ones that stop you from understanding it. You don't want anybody to look at one of your figures and go, what is that? But rather questions like, oh, I wonder, why is that like this? What can I do to find out more? Science graphics should do two things, and I think as scientists, we often forget that they should do two things. They should communicate information. We're visual beings. Graphics are great, right? We can communicate a lot better than with the written word. But they also need to spark curiosity, because without that, we're kind of like letting our graphics down in a way, not just our audiences. So I've spoken now for 15 minutes. I'm tired. Could you all draw Earth? If you want to, don't worry, nobody's gonna have to come up here and show it to the class. Just like 5 minutes, nobody, be mindful of time. We only have limited time. I see people very intensely focused now. I want to go and have a look. Yeah, afterwards you can show me. That's true. That's right. Here are a bunch of Earths. And I imagine some of you may have drawn one of these or something similar, or not at all, because truth is, whatever I tell you to draw, you can draw it in a limitless number of ways, right? Even just with a pencil and paper. So I'm limiting your tools and still. Now, with anything graphic, there are often many ways to represent it. And what defines whether a graphic is successful or not? I don't like to talk in terms of good or bad, because that's quite subjective. With successful, what I mean is whether a graphic is able to communicate the information that you intend to communicate and to communicate it to the audience you intend to reach. What determines that is whether you've actually thought about who the audience are, what the message is, where is that graphic gonna live? So even something as abstract as a blue dot that you could look at, the one on the far left there, and be like, well, that's too simplistic. Surely that is too simplistic to be useful at all. It doesn't have to be. This is an article from Science Magazine. I think this was the Guardian weekend magazine. And there's an article about sea level rise. The reason why this graphic works really well, well, there's two reasons. One of them is if you're flicking through the magazine, it's very bold. It will stop you because in your mind, a question will pop. What is that? And that as soon as that question pops into your mind, as a person that designs graphics, I've got you. I've got you. So, and the second reason why it works is because as soon as you read the title, the only thing your brain is gonna see is a planet covered in water. That's it. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a scientist, if you're not a scientist, what you know. It's a blue dot. These are the three little legs that successful science graphics stand on. Whether you've spent some time thinking about the message, thinking about the context, and thinking about the audience. I'm going to go through them very quickly. And the first one, if you're a scientist, this is going to make you squirm. It always does. I'm sorry. I'm doing it for your own good. One image, one message, one paper figure, one message, one graphic for a magazine article, one message. Not 2, not 6, not 25. If you can't articulate the message of your figure in 1 or 2 sentences, something is going wrong, because you can't keep expecting the public to just meet you already halfway through your ideas. You need to meet them where they are. And the place they are is they don't know anything. They're meeting your graphic, make it easy for them. So this sort of habit we get into where we start creating a figure, our understanding is evolving because we're spending time creating that figure and we keep putting things into it because new ideas keep popping into our head. That does not help the person see in the figure. The second thing is context. And I'm using, I traveled today by train here. I don't know if you've ever noticed how when you travel through a busy train station, I think that was Waterloo Station, and that was a really big billboard. And I remember it very clearly, even though this was ages ago. It was a white billboard and it said the word happiness in very bold green letters. That is it. It was made funnier by the fact that underneath it said network rail. But that's all it was. Then by the time you descend into the tube, the underground, the adverts have changed. They may be for the same thing, but the adverts have changed. They now have more text because you're standing on a platform and you have 1 or 2 minutes. When you make it inside of the underground, the tube carriage, the adverts are completely different again. They have a lot of text. Sometimes they have entire paragraphs because you've got the time. Marketing advertisers do this routinely. They think not about necessarily who you are, but where you are, where is that interaction happening? We should do that with science graphics too. Because if I am walking through a very busy conference hall full of posters, and you have a poster there, it's competing for attention with every other poster. Whereas if you attend a talk I'm giving, you're all trapped in here. You have nowhere else to look but there, right? And that brings me nicely into audience, because we often think of our audiences in terms of their level of knowledge, right? Particularly like when we talk about science, our lecturers or supervisors always tell us, oh, you're giving a talk. Remember, not everybody has your same specialism. That is really important. But there's something else that we keep forgetting, that your audience are people and they have their own lives, their own very busy lives. And this, together with what I was saying about context, means that, again, using a conference setting, my level of knowledge and my interests, those stay fixed. I'm in a conference center, I'm walking around the posters, I'm actively seeking knowledge. In that moment, I am already like expecting to learn something, I'm willing to dedicate the energy to learn something. Later that day, in the evening, I'm back in my hotel, I've spent all day in a conference, I'm flicking through social media, and maybe you have a recent publication, you presented it at the conference, and I come across it in social media. I probably will scroll right past it because my level of knowledge hasn't changed, but the circumstances have. So maybe a figure that was a really amazing data visualization, you're presenting these really exciting results, and I really enjoyed it at the conference in your poster. If you gave me the exact same in social media, it might not work. And that's why these 3 things should always be in our mind before we design anything graphic. It's like, who are we making it for? How are they going to interact with it? And what do I really, really, really want to say? So there are a few ways or a few strategies that I use in order to try to improve my graphics. I still practice these all the time, and I think they are things that everybody can take on board. They don't require any particular skill level, drawing ability, self-perceived or otherwise. And I'm gonna take you through, I think, 5 or 6 of them today. But I'm gonna start with this. This is again by Chris Neiman, the graphic designer I mentioned. He talks about how for any graphic, there is a perfect balance point. So in this case, he's trying to represent love, and he's arguing that there's a perfect balance point where you can represent a concept in a way that is very clear to many, many people, but also very simple. And if you get good at finding that balance point, then your graphics will really communicate and be compelling, and people will engage with them. So in this case, the heart, the icon of a heart is universally recognizable. If you go too far too realistic, it becomes a little bit gruesome. Most people would probably not read love from the one on the left, and the one on the right is just a little bit abstract. Icons themselves I find really fascinating because they're extremely simple in form, but they put across quite complex ideas oftentimes. And so we have another drawing exercise. I'd like you, those of you that are scientists, could you represent your scientific discipline as an icon and show it to the person next to you, see if they can guess it? If you're not a scientist, you can pick either hobby, you can pick your profession, it doesn't matter. Icons are difficult, I'll give you that, so do your best. Some people will be done because it'll be easy, and then some people will really not be done. If you're a volcanologist, lucky you, happy days. Volcano, everybody knows what it is. Everybody can guess it. You know, maybe if you're a paleontologist, also can sort of, if you do what I do, breakup of continents, well, maybe. The reason why I put this in here is because the first thing that I always tell scientists is that simplifying is like your friend. And scientists don't always like to hear that, because when I say the word simplify, what they hear is dumbed down. That's not what I said. I said simplify. So in this case, where I ask you to represent your scientific discipline, say it's very difficult. You could just acknowledge, okay, well, perhaps it's not possible to represent what I'm trying to represent in an icon form in this case. I'll represent earth science. So I've gone up one level. I'm not making it wrong. I'm an earth scientist. Perhaps I'm not just telling you the specific discipline, or I'm telling you I'm an earth scientist. Or I could even go one level up and say I'm a scientist, even though this icon, it's like some people will read doctor, perhaps medicine from it. Simplicity is your friend, because one, if you don't feel like you're really creative and you have really amazing drawing skills or a lot of time, simplifying will save you time. But also it will increase the accessibility to your figures. More people will be able to read and to see what you're trying to show them. So one way of simplifying is, you know, moving in this scale from more specific to less specific, and acknowledging that sometimes it's okay to be a little less specific, if by doing that you increase accessibility. The other way to simplify is by removing detail, removing unnecessary detail. And this is something I do routinely with anything I do. It doesn't matter if it's a paper figure, a page on the book, is look at it and think, what can I remove? Okay, I'll remove something. Can I remove something else? Okay, I'll remove that too. Then I remove a third thing. No, I've lost the message. Removing elements and checking with yourself, well, did I lose the message? It's a really good exercise because it removes clutter and it removes a little bit of a barrier. When we give somebody something really cluttered and really full of elements, it's hard for them to engage and to read it and to follow it. So if somebody has never met me before and I want them to find me in a crowd, I might need the one on the far right. But for somebody that's seen me many times, has been to my website, that knows that I use that icon everywhere, probably I could even go as far as removing my face and just leaving the glasses and the hair, and that's it. So that's two ways of simplifying that can really help. The next thing I always consider is navigation. Every science graphic, so we use graphics, right? Because we know that we are visual beings and it's easier to communicate through graphics than through the written word a lot of the time. People are not going to sit there and read a long paragraph. So we just assume that, oh, it's a graphic. So by being a graphic, it's already better than a chunk of text. Not necessarily. When we pick up a paper, that paper makes navigation very easy. It has a title, it has an abstract, it has sections that have headers that tell me what the section is about. I can find exactly what I need with very little effort. And then you get onto a page that has a figure that has 3 panels and then a smaller one and then the keys in the middle because it just fit there and I didn't know where to put it. And you don't really know what's the order you should read them. Maybe if you're lucky, they have A, B, C, D. And the same happens with science posters at conferences. To me, science posters are in themselves a type of graphic. They have text, but they're still a type of graphic. Maybe if you're lucky, you get sections and they are numbered and you can go, okay, 1, 2, 3, right, I can follow the numbers. But we should do a lot more than that. And we can do a lot more than that very simply by using visual hierarchy, which is something that if you're interested in, you can find out about for free by just Googling visual hierarchy or visual hierarchy in design. I like how some people are still reading. Some people always get to the bottom of the paragraph. I'm not going to tell you what it said. This can be done with posters. And here's something else that makes scientists often squirm. I like to do that to fellow scientists. Empty space. Look at all that wasted real estate. Except it's not, because by having that empty space on the left, by using color, by using a bigger font, I'm making sure that out of 100 people that walk past this poster, okay, I won't say 100, that's always one that's like chooses to do something else. 99 will first look on the left there, because that's where your eyes go. So I'm making navigation intuitive. You're not noticing, but I'm guiding you along a path that I want you to follow, where you're going to go from 1 to 2. And that in itself is going to help you decide if you're interested or if you're not interested. Because if you're not interested, quite frankly, I don't want to waste your time. Move on, go find something else. And if you are interested, you'll move to the side, which breaks all the rules of poster making as taught to students at university. Oh, that's a lot of text. Yeah, but by the time you made it to the side, you've already decided you're interested. So I can give you more text because you already have made an initial investment that, oh, I'm interested. This was an actual real poster about a project that I illustrate that we're just gonna also tell you about it, because why not? That's called Did This Really Happen? And illustrates sexism in science. Yes, it still happens. Here are some other examples of kind of unorthodox posters that, again, have quite a lot of blank space. Again, use visual hierarchy. These little sort of line drawings in here are just showing you how the content is organized into different types of grids. Again, something that is only one Google away, the use of grids in design. And they're quite unorthodox in that they show you a really big picture and then text that is too small to read. You would have to get quite close to this poster to read it. But that is fine, because I know that you're gonna walk past these and the color and the question in your head, oh, what is that? It's gonna make you approach it. So I can give you small text because I'm making you approach it anyway. Visual hierarchy is not something that is just to be used in big things like posters, but also we should use it a lot more in our individual figures. Like here's a block diagram. This sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, depends on the person. We often in the Western world read top to bottom, left to right. You can be mindful of that when you place the labels on a diagram, if you can. At times that's not possible, right? Because labels have to go where they have to go and you can't order them in the way that you want people to read them. Also, sometimes it doesn't matter. All of these annotations could be independent things. It doesn't matter which order you read them. But I can still use visual hierarchy to guide you without you noticing, so that you see the things that I want you to see. Like maybe I want you to focus on the cross-section. Maybe I want you to focus on the top. It's the same diagram. All I've changed is both of them are 1-point perspective. All I've changed is this one, I've raised the point a little bit. So I'm seeing it a bit from the top. And I'm using color to force your eye to a certain place. We should always see science graphics as stories, right? Stories have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. It's like that should also be embedded in all of our science graphics. And this leads me nicely to something else that I think is really important, which is color, and how we should use color a little bit more mindfully, not randomly, not something that we add at the end, throw some colors in just because we want some color in our graphics. This is a page from my book again, which it's a nice example because it has color being used in two very different ways. It has color as decoration. Like all of the background is quite muted because I don't care too much that you focus a lot on the map in the background, a little bit, but it's not the main thing. And then it also uses color as a carrier of information, because without the color, you wouldn't be able to tell which landmass is which in all of these reconstructions, which are reconstructions in the future of the next supercontinent. Now, when color is used as decoration, do as you like, choose colors you like, use the whole rainbow. When color is used to carry information, then it's a lot more critical. The top scale here is something that you've all seen before. If you open your weather app, often temperature is shown as a gradient of blue to red. That is the rainbow color map. Sometimes it's known as a jet color map. The bottom one is a different color grading called Batlow. I chose that because it also goes kind of from blue to red. When color carries information, there are two things that should be important to us as scientists. One is that it represents the information accurately, and jet doesn't, even though it's used everywhere in science. If you pick equally spaced points along the jet color bar, you can see that towards the left end, the color changes very slowly. It goes from blue to blue, darker blue, lighter blue. But if you come over here, in the same space, like in the same distance, the color changes so much that actually we even have two different names, yellow, orange. That doesn't happen in Batlow because Batlow is perceptually uniform. When you represent scientific data like range of temperatures from blue to red, cold, hot, with scales like jet, what happens is that the data that falls within parts of the color bar where color changes slowly kind of get hidden away, trying to find the right word, and data that falls within parts that change in color quickly get amplified. So your reader is reading the data in a distorted way, and there's nothing they can do about it because some things just get shown more strongly. So it's a bit like having a ruler that instead of having even markings, it has all kinds of random markings. The other reason why I don't like rainbow as a carrier of information is because when you convert it to grayscale, there are colors like the blue at the left and the red over here, they're the same gray. And the same with the other two, they're the same shade of gray. So somebody that's colorblind, if I give them a map, they uses, like the weather map, they uses all of those colors. They won't be able to tell some from others. Whereas something like Batlow, it's besides being perceptually uniform, it's universally readable. And those two things make it a lot more fit for science. There's lots of scientific color maps. This is a free set of them, and there's lots of them in there. They're called the scientific color maps. They're free. You Google them, you download them. They're in lots of software. And when color is used as an information carrier, using scientific color maps just makes sense because what scientists want to represent their data in a distorted way. And yet we still routinely do. Scales like jet are everywhere. Right, you have 10 seconds to draw a tree. Panic. Oh, I need to count. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stop. Right. I bet you, here are some trees. I bet you nobody drew the veins inside of individual leaves, right? You drew a trunk and a canopy, and that's it. And maybe if you had a few seconds spare, maybe you added the little detail. That is the logical way to go about it. This is the time I have. What can I do? What is key? And the reason why I have this in here is because my next tip for creating graphics that are successful is be strategic. If you have an hour to put together a poster for a conference, then attempting to put your entire 4-year PhD into it might be stretching it a little bit. Instead, you might have to simply choose a very compelling figure, making it really big, taking most of the poster, one paragraph of text, and a link to find out more. And you'd be shocked at the amount of people that are piqued by the curiosity of not being given all of the information. There's nothing that works better to start conversations and discussions than leaving things out. And kind of hand in hand with being strategic, which also, by the way, like in the beginning, I was showing you Pablo, right? And I also talked about how people respond differently to things depending on circumstances and where they're interacting with graphics. So if I had a really exciting new paper and I've been presenting it at conferences and I have a publication and I want to tell people in my social media about it, something like folding a little piece of paper into something that looks like a magazine, posting it with Pablo, taking a photo and posting that and telling them that Pablo is reading a very exciting paper with a link to the paper, that often works quite well because it's a bit silly, it's a bit funny. It works better than just a dry paper in a place like social media. Last tip, or penultimate actually, but kind of the last significant one. This was me a while back trying to put together a timeline of how I go about creating graphics. And I've talked about some of these things, but not all today. I've talked about simplification and color and design, but it's this last part on the right that I want to kind of mention and give it a bit of time, because whenever you finish making something, it should be a common exercise to go back to the start, to re-ask yourself, does this say what I intended it to say at the beginning? Does this speak to the audience that I intended to speak to? Can I maybe give it to a few colleagues and ask them, what does this figure say to you? What is the message I'm trying to put across? And check whether you're getting an answer back that is what you want to hear or not. And lastly, like always, 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 there is something that you can take out. Always. I'm quite stubborn with that. People sometimes say, no, because I already made, no, take something out. There's always something you can take out and reduce the visual clutter and make it more accessible for people, less intimidating, lower the intimidation factor. The last thing I do almost obsessively is collect art. And by that, I mean, in the same way that if I come across a article that I think, oh, this might be interesting, I'm gonna save the paper. I'll come back to it later. Do that with figures. Because if you see something, I remember when I saved this one in the middle here by Dorothy, I remember I really liked the way that she did the shading, where she only uses blue to highlight the water, everything else is grayscale. And I thought, that is really nice. That, you know, that could be an inspiration for me at some point. And the same with all of them. If you see something that the colors just call out to you and you think, oh, I always struggle picking colors when I'm using them for decoration. Well, maybe I can save this and then I can use the same colors as they used. Collect them, organize them, throw them all into a folder just to flick through before you start creating your own. It's super inspiring and it's a really good way to feed your creativity. It's like it feeds it, it gives it ideas, and you know, you'll come up with things that you wouldn't come up with otherwise. Obviously, if you're copying something quite closely, reference it, cite it, say based on the work of. Don't steal people's work, please. But collect art, collect images. So I'm going to start wrapping up. I think we all agree that graphics are a really good way to give people an entryway into science. They're more appealing. They make us less lazy. You know, if I have to read a lot, maybe I won't. And they are like a little window into our brain, into our ideas. We have an idea, we want to get it out. Beyond learning about design, which is important, it can be very useful. There are other things, other steps that come first that are really important. And then I see scientists all the time forgetting. The first one is connecting with the audience. How are you going to convince somebody to dedicate just the 10-15 seconds of attention that it will take for them to actually want to know more? Are you gonna post something that maybe it's a funny cartoon that makes people curious to go and read your paper? Or are you gonna make a silly face on a pebble to start talking to children about rocks and about how river pebbles form? You have to give people an entryway. And once you do that, you need to give them a path. And this is where all those things I talked about, visual hierarchy and making navigation intuitive, come in. Give them a path to follow so they don't get lost and end up somewhere else that you don't want them to end up. And make sure that they're going towards a destination that is clear rather than cram 3 different messages into one figure. I'll say it again, one figure, one message, not more, please. If you do these things, then that is when communication through graphics is really successful, because you're first connecting with someone in whichever way you're doing that. You're guiding them in a way that they don't notice. So they're moving through the story that you're telling very easily. And when they get there, they get to a nice surprise, an exciting new discovery, something, I don't know, the main outcome of your research project, whatever it might be. If you don't take anything else, if you're a scientist and you don't take anything else from today, I hope you do, but if you don't take anything else, take this. People generally do not ever take in what you show them. They take in what they see. Making really good graphics and being really good at communicating with varied audiences is about predicting how they see and making sure that they see exactly what you want them to see. They won't know, but it's you who's guiding what they see. And if you're not a scientist and you see us scientists putting out awful graphics that are impossible to understand, tell us. Let us know. Say, you've lost me there. I have no idea what you're going on about. Because it's through doing that that we also improve a lot. And we need to improve because we need to really get into the habit of meeting the public where they are, not where we think they should be. Oh, you should be interested in this project. It's really groundbreaking. Okay, I have laundry to do. So I'm gonna stop there. There's a couple of articles that I've written recently. One is in Geoscientist, talks more about this concept of designing with empathy. They're quite short, so you can have a read if you want to. And if you want to look at the book, you can ask me. Yeah, I'll take questions now, I guess.
Very much. That was really excellent. I certainly enjoyed it, even though I gave away the pencils and didn't keep one for myself. So I have nothing to show you. I'm sorry. Okay, we're going to open up for some questions. So if you've got a question in the room, please put your hand up and we'll get a mic towards you. And there will also be some questions in the room as well. So Alicia, we've got a couple down here. Do this one first, and then you, Sarah, afterwards.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. The production of images or diagrams or whatever from narrative or a data set, maybe in a particular style, in your style or The Economist or The New Yorker, but by AI, do you think that's a threat or is it an opportunity?
Oof. How long? I knew AI would come up. There's two questions that I always get asked first. It's either AI or what software do I use? So from the community I move in, from the creatives, and like engaging with people like publishers and so on, there was an initial very big spike of curiosity for AI and AI generated content. And then it very quickly moved to, oh no, but we want to distinguish ourselves by working with real talent. So I think overall in the creative industry, there is a lot of support for individuals that are artists rather than AI. Scientists sometimes are curious as to, oh, could I get AI to create a figure for me that is going to be better than what I could do? And I think certainly it's something you can experiment with, whether it's something that will save you any time, which is normally what scientists are trying to do with AI, save time. I think experiment a bit and you'll see that actually, if anything else, it consumes more time, because it is where it is as of today. And so you're always having to edit what AI does. And so in the end, you end up spending more time. I also see it in a slightly different way, which is that, and this applies as well, I'm a writer. And for some of so I was working for a big organization. At one point, we had this brief that we were not to use ChatGPT to write, even drafts, nothing, no AI anywhere. And then I got to thinking a lot about it. And from their perspective, they made a point that I thought was really interesting, which is that if you want to be a writer, or if you want to create your own figures or whatever it is, it's doing that will get your skills to grow. So every time you're using AI, effectively what you're doing is giving away your skills and like letting them become worse and worse and worse. I always say to people, oh, if you feel like you can't draw, start, because you're only gonna get better, except if you use AI, then you actually probably get worse because you'll stop being able to build concepts in your head as well. So, but it's a really interesting and fast evolving topic.
Thank you.
Take one online.
So we have a question that asks, when dealing with color, how is best to take into consideration people who are colorblind?
Oh, really great question. So easiest way, turn things into grayscale. Lots of software can do that. This is a PDF, my presentation. You can turn things into grayscale in PDF, I think. And there are lots of websites that can do it. If it's not readable in grayscale, bad sign. Make it readable in grayscale. There is also websites. There's one I can think of called Coblis, Coblis, where you can drag any graphic and you can tick through the boxes and it will turn it into what it looks like for somebody with all the different types of color vision deficiency. So it's like, when you're done, just check things. Yeah, they look good. Great.
Thank you.
And it's free.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting series of things that make me think about, actually. But going back to your first slide, I can't draw. And yet I've had to prepare loads and loads of lectures using PowerPoint. But something I always start off with in my mind is the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so, and I can't draw, but there are many, many thousands and thousands of pictures out there on Google Images or whatever, and you can, using software, edit them to fit exactly what you need. You have to play with the software. So I couldn't have done that before we had the internet. I couldn't draw. But it's just an observation. I just like that saying. I always start off, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
I like that saying. I always say in that article I wrote, I say a picture speaks louder than 1,000 words, but it can be speaking in a foreign language. When we create figures that do not guide you, that do not offer you an entry point, yeah, it's great, but you can't understand it. But that's a good point. And the thing I want to add is there are lots of science artists out there, lots, and you can reach out to them as well. And they won't always be open. If you catch me, like at the moment, I'm working on my second book. So at the moment, I'm not taking any projects of any kind because I don't have the time. But that doesn't mean that at a different time I wouldn't. So it is possible to collaborate with artists and to get them to create things that you can then use for teaching. And you can just cite them, like put their name, and then other people find out about them. So yeah, a few ways.
Thank you.
Hi, a very simple question. I've heard of the jet scale for measuring color. I've never heard of the Batlow scale. What is that exactly?
So Batlow is part of a suite of color bars called the Scientific Color Maps. If you Google Scientific Color Maps, you'll find a website that has all of them. You can download them for free. They're available for lots of software. And Batlow is an attempt of the creators of the Scientific Color Maps at giving people something that resembles rainbow in the sense that it also goes from blue to red, but that is both perceptually uniform and universally readable. So it's part of that suite and they are free. There is also a paper that is open access in Nature that you'll find on the website as well that explains kind of the thought process behind creating these color maps and why they're important.
It's a fairly new development, is it? I've never heard of it before, but is it a long while?
Paper is 2020.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question from a scientist who loves illustration, who asks, how do you manage your time being a scientist and an illustrator?
With difficulty. I currently work in industry. Before I was in academia. I did my PhD and I was a postdoc. My hours now are better. That definitely helps. So for anybody that is a researcher, we all know how sometimes if you're a postdoc, you end up working very long hours. That doesn't help. Whereas now, generally, my hours are quite good. Other than that is by not being overly ambitious and turning things down. That will happen. You have to sometimes be like, well, I'd love to take on this project, but objectively, I can't. And so you have to turn things down. And also breaking it into small pieces. Like I don't let it say, now I'm working on my book. I have a deadline fast approaching. It's a little bit stressful, but I know that the most I'm ever gonna be able to dedicate is maybe an hour and a half at the end of the day after work. So I will just not commit to anything that would take more than that because I simply can't. And that is hard at first when you're trying to get out a bit more, get out there, get your illustrations seen. You want to take lots of projects, but it's only gonna be detrimental because you're just gonna burn out. So it is a bit of a balancing act. Also finding opportunities to illustrate during my work, like figuring out, oh, do you need a figure for a paper? Oh, I could help. Like getting involved in things that then are part of your job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question kind of revolves around the success that you've had both with adults and now with children. You often get told to not dumb down information when trying to display them to children. How do you approach that from an illustration point of view?
Well, so a good example of that is that I think the first meeting I came into with my agent to DK, one of the first things that came out of my mouth was, we're not making the mantle red, we're making it green. And so it was like, I guess I never want to dumb down information because there are already, in the children's space, there are already too many books in the bookstores that are wrong. And so I never wanted to do that. What I tried to do is, if I realize that I can't explain something simply enough, maybe I won't explain that specific aspect. But everything I'm putting in the book, which the book is not, it's about plate tectonics, but it tells it as a story of how it was discovered. So it's not just, it's not a textbook, it's more a story of how science works and how people work together and what findings they made and how that ended up being plate tectonics. But anything that is too complex, I'm just leaving out or just abstracting it, going up a level. Because yeah, I think there's no point dumbing things down. Children are very switched on, never mind, like they always surprise me. But I think the feeling that, oh, it's not possible to explain this without dumbing it down is not always right. Sometimes it's just that we need to acknowledge that, okay, I haven't thought about it long enough to have yet figured out a way that I can explain to children that the mantle is actually solid, but it flows, but it's solid, but it flows. And so, you know, like sometimes it's on us to actually have to think harder.
Thank you. Mike Field's planetary astronomy, and we're dealing with stuff that's a very long way away, or it's very long ago, and we get lots of wonderful illustrations which are scientifically very, very misleading. What can we do about it?
Depends who you're getting them from. Can you reach out to the people that are creating them?
They're usually scientists.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I give these shows, I never ever put any figures by any other scientists because I don't want to show something and be like, oh, it's a bit tricky. The way I approach it is, because I know there are children's books that are so wrong, let me put one out that is actually okay. Sometimes that's as much as you can do, really. But sometimes, like if you meet the person and you can have like, and you feel like they are open to a conversation, and you can, you know, maybe sometimes you can have constructive conversations, but it's a bit, yeah, on a person by person basis, I guess.
One question from anyone? I'm going to
We're
ask
ready
if I
for
may.
this. Oh, sure, sure.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
You mentioned at the beginning, the other question that you often get asked is what software you're using. So for people that have been sketching with their pencil and paper today, they want to go away and they want to try and create digital. What do you recommend as the next steps?
So pencil and paper are great. I always start with pencil and paper, doing very ugly sketches like the one I showed you. That's not a one-off. That's generally my sketchbook. Something free is Inkscape. That's free, and you can play with it and see how you like it. And then one level up from that is something called the Affinity Suite, which you pay for once. Now that everything is a subscription, you pay for it once and you have it. Then, of course, from that, I use the Adobe Suite just because I get it through work. So obviously, I'm not paying for it. Otherwise, unless you're really, really serious and you really like it, it's quite expensive. More than the software, I would say, if you want to dabble into digital illustration, there are these little tablets, for lack of a better name. They don't have a screen. The one I use doesn't have a screen. And it's just a pencil and a surface. And so you can actually draw with a pencil, which is far better for your hand than a mouse. And I would say that is a better investment than expensive software, because it will make it a lot easier for you. And they're small, you could just, take them with you. So I need to get like a sponsor that pays me for like plugging their tablets.
Great tip, thank you. Let's give
But yeah.
see a round of applause again.
Thanks.
So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. For those of you online, we will be saying goodbye shortly, but just to let you know that our next public lecture is on the 9th of September, Tuesday evening, and it's actually in partnership with our Early Career Network. So we'll be talking about a rare record of snowball Earth from Scotland, and there'll be a plug up on the screen about that shortly. So do please join us for that one. Our public lectures this year have been generously sponsored by KSAT, which is fantastic. It allows us to open them up to more people and provide refreshments. So for those of you in the room, I'm delighted to say that we're going to open the doors at the back of the lecture theatre for you, and we'll hope you'll join us for a drinks reception. You'll be able to chat, have a look at the book, and ask any other questions that you may have. So thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your evening.